Hi, everybody. Before I start, I do have a bit of an admission to make, and that is that I am a salesperson. Are there any other salespeople in the room? Thank heavens for that. I have some friends at any rate. Well, I don't know about you, but when I find myself stood in front of a room full of global pricing directors, strategic pricing managers, intergalactic value analyzers, I feel a little bit nervous. But to be honest with you, I think as pricing people, you should feel a little bit nervous sat in front of me as well. Because to borrow something of an Americanism, I am where the pricing rubber meets the customer road. Yeah, so I am the person who makes it happen for you or not. And that is in itself something of an issue. I've already spoken to lots of people in the room about this ability of the sales team to translate the prices you set into reality, and there does seem to be something of a disconnect at the moment between those two things, but I'll come back to that a little bit later on. One of the things that that salespeople say to me is that the interesting thing about pricing people is that pricing people are those people who plan the battle from the comfort of battalion headquarters without ever actually having to go out and do the fighting. Which I think is perhaps a slightly jaundiced view, but it's an interesting perspective. And the other problem, I think, for salespeople is that too frequently they lack either the tools to help them to communicate the price or the training to be able to utilize those tools effectively. And I think if you then start to look at the sales role, to actually plan our battles effectively, we really need high-quality information from the front line. And this, I think, is potentially a hugely important role for the sales team, as if you like, the communications hub between the company and its customers. And certainly we would need to look to the sales team to go out, understand what our customers are looking for, understand their needs, the driving issues behind what they're trying to do, the opportunities that they're trying to take advantage of, and bring that information back into the organization so that we can then begin the process of differentiating, putting together tailored solutions to meet the requirements of individual customers, and then allowing the salespeople to go back out to the customers to present, to sell, and then to deliver the sophisticatedly calculated prices that we have to the customers to sort of bring in that value. Only all too often, that is not what happens. And the real question is, why not? And I think there are two answers to that. One is value, and the other is dolphin training. Now, the dolphin training I'll come back to a little bit later on, because it's quite an interesting concept. But when I think about value, and when I think about price management, I think about two things. I think about price setting, which for most pricing people, I guess, is where you come from, that ability to take the data and actually come up with prices. But then there's the really important role that the sales team tend to fulfill, and that's the role of price getting. And I think all too often there is a disconnect between those two functions. And my real interest is in how do we bring those two things much more closely together? How do we help them work more effectively together? And how do we, particularly from my point of view, provide the sales team with the tools and the training and the capabilities to be able to go out there and do what we need them to do as effectively as they can? And one of the issues around that is this understanding of value. And certainly in my experience, in dealing with literally hundreds upon hundreds of salespeople, is the understanding of value outside of just features and benefits is extraordinarily limited. There really is a big intellectual gap for many salespeople in terms of understanding just what value is. So we started to look at this and started to think about what these challenges of value were for customers. And we've come up with 7 challenges of value, which I will share with you. Now, the first challenge of value is, interestingly enough, understanding exactly what on earth value is. And I think there are two elements there. One is actually understanding what value is, what it means, what the component elements of value are. And the second is understanding what value is from our customer's perspective. So you need the first to be able to undertake the second. And some years ago, I was talking at a sales conference in Copenhagen for a specialty chemicals company, as it happens, Frank, not yours. And the night before, I was having dinner with these people, and I was amazed at how many of these salespeople told me that the one thing they delivered to their customers was great value. In fact, I got told this so often that in the morning I scrapped what I was going to do to start with, and I said, right guys, what I'd really like you to do is, since you deliver great value to your customers, I'd like you to tell me what it is. So what I want you to do is I want you to come up with a definition of value. And there were about 120 people in the room, about 10 tables or so, and the minute I asked them to do it, you knew there was going to be a problem, because there was much scratching of heads, much confused looking at each other. And anyway, in the end, I got back 10 or 12 cards. And I decided that what I would do is I'd go through the cards and I'd read out what each of these tables had come up with as their definitions of value. And there were 12 completely different definitions. There were some similarities, obviously. But there was one that stood out amongst all others. And it's the one that we now use always as our definition of value. There were 4 words on the card, 2 of which were value is. So you can tell it as a fairly brief definition. And the definition is value is a mystery. And at the time, I thought, goodness me. But the more I thought about that, the more appropriate it seemed to be for, well, not just for a sales perspective, for a business's perspective. Our job surely is to get out there and solve the value mystery. If we are going to price effectively, as a number of people have said, we need to understand what it is that our customers value. If we don't know what they value, how on earth can we begin the process of either putting our prices together on that basis, and particularly then going out and selling our value, putting value propositions together and the like? I don't think it can be done. So that was the starting point. And as I said, there are 2 elements to that. One is understanding what it is. The other is actually understanding how to understand that from a customer's point of view. And I'll come back and have a look at another tool a little bit later on. So that's our first challenge. The second challenge is a bit of an annoying one, really. And that is, once you've understood what value is, you also have to recognize that people's perceptions of value are constantly changing. So just because I know what you mean by value today does not mean you will value the same things in a week's time or a month's time or whenever it is, because business situations are in a state of constant flux. So for a salesperson particularly, this is a challenge. Once I've understood what your value looks like now, I have to constantly revisit it to make sure I can keep up to date. Identifying people who care. I cannot tell you how many times salespeople say to me, who should we be talking to in the target customer? And my answer to that, I think the historical answer was always aim as high as you can in a customer's business in order to gain entry. My answer to the question now is you should be aiming to talk to the people in the customer's business who will benefit the most from the value that you deliver. And if you find that there is a customer who doesn't care about value, either as an individual or as an organization, then you really have to ask yourself the question, do I want to be dealing with this customer or not? And that's a completely separate decision which falls outside of just the pure value analysis. So understanding the people who actually care about value is really important. We then need to differentiate in ways that matter to the customer. And we've talked about and we've heard about differentiation on and off over the course of the last couple of days. But for me, being different is not differentiation. Differentiation is being different in ways that your customers value. And if you don't understand what your customers value, challenge number 1, then you can't differentiate. And equally, if you don't understand what your competitors are doing, you can't differentiate because you can't differentiate in a vacuum. So that's another thing you need to understand. You then need to be able to communicate your value. And here we're talking about things like value propositions and how you put that together. But for a customer, the question he wants answering is, why on earth should I choose your solution rather than a competing solution? And that then means that the sales team has to have the ability to form persuasive value propositions, which means that they need the ability to monetize the value of what they do and communicate that value effectively to their customers. And that will then allow us to begin the process of capturing value through price, which again is a subject that we've spoken about on a number of occasions. Now I'm going to come back to dolphin training, as I said to you a little bit later on. But one of the key elements of dolphin training is one of the problems salespeople have. I go out with salespeople all the time. And when it comes to that crucial moment in the sales conversation, when the customer effectively says, well, how much is it? Most salespeople start the process of apologizing. You look at their body language, everything about them says, oh dear, this is the one question I was hoping you weren't going to ask. But what their body language says is, we could have an opportunity to move here. And I'll touch on that a bit later on. The last element, which is absolutely fundamentally important, is you've got to deliver. You have to deliver the value that you promised. And more than that, in an ideal world, you should measure. You should agree what measurement criteria there should be in place with the customer, and you should measure that you are delivering the value that you originally promised that you would deliver. For two reasons. First of all, I just think it's good business practice. And secondly, it actually allows you to put together some really quite persuasive case studies, because if you have case studies that demonstrate you do what you say you're going to do, then that is persuasive when you start putting value propositions together for new potential customers. So is everybody happy with that? Can everybody sort of feel along that? Now, as I said to you, value as a mystery is great as a definition, but it doesn't actually help in terms of understanding what value is. And with these guys over in Copenhagen, it became quite evident that there was an issue around, well, what does value mean? What are the component elements? And for that, we developed this concept called the value triad. And we identified what we believe are three critical components of value, particularly within a B2B context. The first one is what we call revenue gain. And the question there is, how does our solution help our customers to improve their revenue? Will it help them to premium price? Will it help them to improve their market share? What will it help them to do that will help them to develop increasing amounts of revenue? The second element is cost reduction. So how can our solution help our customers to reduce their costs? And the third element is fundamentally important. Because businesses don't make decisions, people do. You can never take emotion out of the decision. And we decided we would call it emotional contribution. But really it covers all of those things, like the value of your brand image to a customer, you know, the reassurance they get in dealing with a company that they know, the confidence they get, the confidence and trust and respect they have for the people that they're dealing with. So if you like, if all of these are the sort of absolutes, the objective, the tangible elements, the revenue gain and the cost reduction, the emotional contribution is very much the more perceptive, the more subjective measure. But they are still hugely important. Unless you're dealing with a customer who's missed a spot from Star Trek, you know, most customers have a degree of emotion locked into their decision-making processes. And we play loads of games with this, and we do a lot of exercises with sales teams, getting them to think about how do they break down what they offer to their customers into component elements. So if we're looking at revenue gain, what elements of their solution will help them to deliver that, and how much revenue gain can we generate? The key point here is how can we actually go about monetizing the value of what we can deliver to customers, and we spend a lot of time doing that. The key point here, and just picking up, especially on what Frank was saying earlier on, the real truth about value is that we don't define it. It doesn't matter how much time you spend in darkened rooms thinking about the value that you deliver to your customers. If your customers do not see it that way, then it's not value. So you have to look at value and define value from your customer's point of view. So the question then is, how do you find out? And the answer to that is over to the sales team. Yeah. if you think about it, there are a variety of sources of information about value and about what customer needs are. One is through market research and all the sort of other background that we do. But the other element, clearly, is through those people who are in most constant daily touch with your customers, the sales team. And so logically, they are the people that we would want to do that. But as we've already seen, one of the issues for salespeople is they don't understand value. And because salespeople don't understand value, when they have price pressure put on them, what they tend to do is they move to what I call the discount default. You're too expensive, have a discount. Thank you very much. And that rather nicely moves me to dolphin training. Now, anybody, just to put some sort of real life into this, does anybody actually have a dolphin? You have no dolphin. Anybody like to have a dolphin? Excellent, thank heavens for that. Well, I'm going to help you out now because I'm going to tell you how to train a dolphin. Because if you're going to have one, we need to work on it. Now, if you have a dolphin, the first thing you're going to need is quite a big pond, actually, quite a big pond, and ideally quite a lot of fish to give the dolphin as a reward as you train it, and a rope. Okay, and we're going to put the rope across the bottom of the pond. And every time the dolphin swims over the rope, you're going to give the dolphin a fish. Because dolphins are quite clever and hungry. And they will quickly work out where their fish is coming from. Now, over time, we'll move that rope off the bottom of the pond. And every time the dolphin goes under the rope, it gets nothing. But every time it goes over the rope, it will get a fish. Until finally, the rope will be on the surface of the pond, and you will have your performing dolphin. It will jump majestically out of the pond and you will give it a fish. Now, what I'd like you to do is I want you to substitute the word dolphin for buyer. I want you to substitute the word fish for discount and substitute the rope for you're too expensive, or any other phrase which means I want a discount, okay? Because that is how salespeople train buyers. Salespeople have the potential to be the world's finest dolphin trainers. And I've spoken to procurement people, and it is true. Procurement people know that in 99% of cases, when they say to a salesperson, you're too expensive, the first thing they do is drop the price. And that is why you're always too expensive. You're not, but they will tell you that you are. And to use an Anglo-Saxon term, one of my clients, after having put this into practice, said to me, he said, I have now worked out, he said, that to do this effectively, you need balls of steel. And he said, for the very, very first time in my sales life, I have started to sit in front of customers, and when they told me that I'm too expensive, I look them in the eye, and I say, well, to be honest with you, when you compare the value that I am delivering to you with the price that I'm charging, I'd go as far as to say we are not expensive enough. And he said, I was amazed at how often the buyer just said, okay. Because they've been trying it on. They had been trained by salespeople so often to say, I want a discount and to get one, that is what they do all the time. So there are ways of getting around this. There are ways of not giving away a discount all the time. And moving away from that discount default button. Press gently to deliver completely unnecessary discounts. I constantly get challenged. One of the things I try to do is to help businesses improve their margins. This is just a simple way of doing it. Just don't give discounts away. And don't give other things away. And it's amazing what people will give away. We talked about Ryanair pricing. Ryanair pricing, in most businesses, they have no idea of Ryanair pricing. They know how to price cheaply, but they still give everything away with it. And one great way of improving your margins is to stop giving things away. That leads me really to the 5 C's of value, which begin to pull the threads together. There are 5 things that I think as a business, as salespeople, that we need to do. The first thing is we have to understand, we have to comprehend the things that our customers value. What is it that our customers attach a value to? Because that's where we can actually leverage our price power. Number 2, we need to create value for the customer. We need to differentiate what we do. So there are 2 things there. We need to solve the value mystery. Value is a mystery. Our job is to solve it. Once we've solved it, we can then think about how we can differentiate what we do in ways that are particularly attractive to our customers. We then have to communicate that value. So somewhere along the line, we have to think about how we can encompass for the customer some really good arguments as to why they should be choosing us. And one of the most effective ways of doing that is that ability to monetize what we do. We then need to convince the customer that the value that we deliver is worth paying for. And we either wrap that up in value-based pricing or whatever it is. But I look at every price is a value-based price, because none of us ever buy anything if we don't perceive at least a commensurate level of value in exchange for what we're being asked to pay. And we've already seen that the value is situational as well. So convince customers it's value worth paying for, and then capture your value through effective pricing. And that really brings the thread together. But the question then is, why don't customers buy? And the primary reason they don't buy is because they just don't understand or appreciate your value. And that is why salespeople revert to discount defaulting, because they don't understand and cannot communicate their value. Somebody has to talk to the customer. Frequently, it is the sales team. But someone has to make sure that they have the skills and the confidence and the capability to do that job well. So it's not just about giving them the tools. It's about making sure that once they have the tools in their hands, they can use those tools effectively. And they can actually leverage the potential power of the tools that you can provide them with. So what do we do next? And I just thought, even if you're on the right track, you will get run over if you just sit there. And that is what's potentially increasingly happening. So what I'd like you to do, just in your mind's eye, is just think about what the takeaways are from this in terms of how on earth do we bring price setting and price getting more closely together? How can you ensure that your sales teams support your pricing initiatives? But equally, how can you ensure that your pricing team actually supports the sales initiatives? How do we actually work together? And more than that, what are you going to do? Yeah, we could do nothing and hope everything will be okay. But for me, this link between pricing and sales is, if you like, the missing link at the moment. And I think there are ways in which we can actually put it together. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah, it's all right.
Thank you very much. Have we got any questions for Mike at the start? Excellent. We've got one over there.
Your point about salesmen selling value. In a one-to-one situation, it's often the buyer is trying to, even though he's aware of that value, he's trying to degrade it or marginalize it as far as the offer is concerned. And this is where you often get a conflict between sales and marketing. Yeah. So a salesman will be trying to sell value or understand it, but he will then say everyone else can do the same, even if his perceptions are different. How do you overcome that issue where value is, the buyer is actually aware of the value and just trying to continually downgrade it and focus on price?
Yeah, I think there are 2 elements to that. The first is, I think there are different kinds of buyer, aren't there? There are different kinds of procurement. There are, if you like, the less mature procurement departments who are filled with people who were admin clerks last week, who just don't understand the concept of value either in the way that sales team don't. And then you have much more professional procurement departments who fully understand the value of what they do. And they recognize that price and cost, for example, are 2 completely different things. I think the way to overcome it is researching your customer, understanding your customer, understanding the things that are important from your customer's point of view. There was some work done some years ago about world-class salespeople. What are the characteristics of world-class sellers? The second characteristic was you understand me and my business. And I think that's fundamentally important. If I am dealing with salespeople who clearly demonstrate that they understand my business in the round, then I think they become much more influential. So when they then start to talk about and defend the value that they're trying to deliver, it's about confidence. It's about not allowing yourself to be constantly browbeaten by procurement people who are increasingly professional, increasingly well-trained, and who are facing salespeople who have this bizarre characteristic, I think, with salespeople. If you think about any profession, if you're a doctor or a lawyer or a solicitor, you have to go through CPD. Yeah, everybody familiar with continuous professional development. You have to demonstrate that you are constantly keeping yourself up to date with what is going on in order to be able to practice. I defy any of you to get a group of salespeople together and say to them, right guys, what was the last thing that you did to improve your own performance? What was the last book you read on selling? And I tell you what, you get a sea of blank faces. They are the only people I know who seem to think that they can carry on doing the same old thing over and over again and everything will be fine. And that's why they do get screwed on value, because they lack the capability to defend themselves. So it's a very long way around coming up with an answer, Paul, but I hope that gets us somewhere there.
Fantastic, thank you. Have we got one more question?
Anybody like to be a salesman?
I think that's because.
Anybody want a dolphin?
Okay. So I've got one question for you, and that's the when we go on this journey of empowering salespeople to have this value discussion, what do you think are the stumbling blocks? You've seen this so many times before. What are the don'ts that we should be aware of?
In empowering people to go, salespeople to go on a value journey. I've done it with a fair number of companies now. What I tend to find is that if you look at an entire sales force, there will be some people in the sales team who frankly already get it. They understand value, and whilst they may not realize they're doing it, they will be talking to their customers about value. There'll then be a sort of a middle section who will get it once it's explained to them. But sadly, there always seems to be a rump, and no matter how much time you take trying to explain it to them, they just don't get it. And that is a stumbling block. But I think also there is a big stumbling block for salespeople. They are unique in as much that most salespeople probably spend, I don't know, 90% of their time on their own, out of the office, out in the field, which means that supporting anything that you do with salespeople starts to become that much more difficult. And most organizations simply do not have a coaching culture in place that actually supports that. Which means that you get people on a training program for 3 or 4 days, and that's it. But developing yourself as an individual, changing your behavior, is a journey. It's a long-term journey. It's not just the destination of spending a couple of days on a training program, and that is a big, big challenge.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you very much for your